There comes a moment quiet, almost unnoticeable when you decide not to respond. Not because you're weak, not because you're defeated, but because you finally understand something that changes everything. Silence can be louder than words, and calm can be stronger than any storm. When faced with a narcissist, the instinct is always the same: to defend, to explain, to plead for understanding. But that's the very trap. That's the theater they've built, the script they've rehearsed, and the spotlight they demand. The moment you stop performing, the moment you walk off that stage, something inside them begins to collapse. Non-reaction isn't indifference, it's mastery. It's the sacred decision to not let your peace be held hostage by someone else's chaos. When you refuse to react, you're not ignoring the pain. You're choosing not to bleed for someone who only understands harm. You are no longer the audience to their drama, nor the victim of their illusions. And that stillness, that unnerving quiet you hold, it's not emptiness, it's strength. It's the kind of strength that doesn't shout but resonates through every boundary you finally dare to hold. A narcissist thrives in disruption. They feed off the chaos they create. But when you offer nothing, no rage, no fear, not even confusion, they are forced to sit with something they've spent a lifetime running from, themselves. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." But for a narcissist, that mirror is unbearable. So instead, they bait, they provoke. They twist your words until you don't recognize yourself. But when you don't respond, when you stand in the eye of their storm without being swept away, the entire structure of their control begins to crack. You're not here to play the role they wrote for you. You're here to reclaim the quiet they fear. Because in your silence lives a truth they cannot manipulate, that you've awakened, and that you finally see them not through fear or guilt, but with clarity, and in that clarity you rise. To understand the narcissist, you must first understand hunger. Not the kind you feel in your stomach, but the kind that lives in the soul, endless, gnawing, desperate. Narcissists don't seek love. They seek fuel, not connection, but control. And the moment you react, when you scream, cry, explain, defend, they drink from it like it's the only thing keeping them alive. Because in truth it is. They don't know how to self-regulate. They don't know how to sit with shame or fear or emptiness. So they throw it at you. They provoke. They poke. They twist the knife not to hurt you, but to feel something themselves. It's their only way of staying emotionally afloat. But here's what Carl Jung warned us. Everything that we deny in ourselves, we project onto others. And that is the narcissist's entire existence. They cannot face their own shadow, the wounds, the shame, the insecurities they refuse to acknowledge. So they make you carry it. They provoke you until you explode, and then say, "See? You're the problem." You become the mirror they smashed because it showed too much truth. They will pick at the softest parts of you, the guilt, the empathy, the loyalty. And when you finally react, they feel powerful because your pain distracts them from their own. That's why they test you, again and again. Not because they're curious, but because your reaction gives them a temporary escape from the void they live in. And if you don't react, if you stay grounded, calm, detached, it terrifies them, because it forces them to sit with what they've spent a lifetime avoiding, the silence inside themselves. A narcissist doesn't want resolution. They want engagement. They want you in the ring, swinging wildly, so they can play victim or victor. They want to control the story, and your reaction is their favorite plot twist. But when you don't give them a script to follow, when you don't play your assigned role, you become unpredictable. And to a narcissist, unpredictability is danger because it means they've lost control. That's when they escalate, or disappear, or pretend not to care. But make no mistake, your calm is not invisible. It's a threat. Because for the first time, they are not the one holding the power. You are. There is a moment bare, heavy, unmistakable when you simply stop. You stop explaining, you stop defending, you stop trying to prove that your heart was in the right place. And it doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly, often after too many tears, too many arguments that circled back to nowhere. It comes when exhaustion becomes clarity. That's the moment the narcissist feels the shift. And trust me, they feel it. Because for the first time, they're not getting what they need. The script they relied on is missing its lead. Their favorite game just lost its opponent. And suddenly, they're face to face with a silence that doesn't beg, doesn't tremble, doesn't chase. At first, they might laugh, mock, call it childish. Oh, now you're giving me the silent treatment? But underneath that surface-level dismissal is something raw, panic. Because your silence isn't passive, it's power. It's a mirror they can't crack. You're not ignoring them, you're refusing to bleed for them anymore. And that is something they never planned for. Their tactics, guilt, blame, gaslight start to fall flat. Their words hit walls instead of open wounds. Their manipulation drowns in your detachment. And that triggers something dark in them. What follows is confusion, anger, sometimes rage. They'll accuse you of being cold, of changing, of becoming heartless. Not because you are, but because their hold is slipping. They'll throw every trick they know at you. Remind you of your past mistakes, rewrite your history together, drag you back into conversations they never intended to resolve. Anything to make you speak. Because the silence burns them more than words ever could. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And your silence? That's their soul knocking. But they won't open the door. They'll blame you instead. In this space of stillness, you're reclaiming yourself. You're no longer a character in their chaos, you're the author of your peace. And though it may feel lonely, don't mistake solitude for weakness. It is in this exact moment, when you don't respond, that you're finally free. When you go silent, the narcissist doesn't disappear. They recalculate. At first, it may seem like peace, like they've accepted your distance. No more arguments, no more games. They might even seem kinder, softer, as if the storm has passed and they've come to their senses. But don't be fooled. This isn't surrender, it's strategy. What you're witnessing isn't transformation, it's camouflage. The narcissist hasn't changed, they've only changed shape. This is the false calm, the quiet before the next ambush, and it's dangerous because it lulls you into hope. You start to wonder, maybe they finally understood, maybe they realized how much they hurt me. But they haven't. What they've realized is that your silence makes them vulnerable, that your refusal to engage robs them of the fuel they've fed on for so long. And so, they pretend to adapt. They back away, not out of respect, but to study your new boundaries, to find the cracks. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." For the narcissist, that unconscious fear of losing control is now screaming. But rather than face it, they mask it. They become polite, even affectionate. They may offer apologies laced with vagueness or nostalgia. "Remember when we used to laugh? I don't want to fight anymore." It feels almost real. Almost. But it's not vulnerability, it's surveillance. They're not letting go. They're regrouping, watching, waiting. The danger lies in how convincing this false calm can be. You want to believe in it. You're tired, you miss the connection, and hope is seductive. But the silence that once protected you becomes the silence they now try to manipulate. They'll leave just enough room for doubt, just enough tenderness to pull you back in. And if you bite, if you respond, they win. The cycle resets, the control resumes. This isn't healing, it's a trap dressed as peace. Don't fall for the quiet if it comes with old patterns wrapped in new language. True calm doesn't ask you to lower your guard. It doesn't require performance. The narcissist's false calm is a mask. And behind it, the same game, just in slower motion. Stay alert, stay anchored, because what they call peace is just another way to pull you back into war. When a narcissist realizes they can no longer control you with rage, guilt, or manipulation, they reach for their final, most insidious weapon, silence. But this isn't the calm of maturity. It's not detachment rooted in self-awareness. This silence is sharp, calculated. It's not absence, it's punishment. A cold, strategic retreat, designed not to give you peace, but to provoke your confusion, to make you suffer in uncertainty. They vanish not to move on, but to leave a wound that doesn't bleed loud enough for others to notice, a wound only you can feel. This kind of silence doesn't feel empty, it feels haunted. It lingers in unanswered texts, in the sudden disappearance from your life without reason, without closure. They don't just stop speaking, they stop acknowledging your existence, and they want you to notice. That's the point. It's a message without words. You are invisible. You don't matter. You no longer have power over me. But in reality, it's their last attempt to maintain power over you. Because to a narcissist, silence isn't space, it's control. They want you to obsess, to wonder what you did wrong, to chase them for answers they'll never give. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." But the narcissist refuses that path. Instead of facing their wounds, they externalize them. And when you stop reacting, when you stop feeding their illusion, they turn to silence as a final blowaway to make you feel small without ever saying a word. This is emotional warfare disguised as detachment. It's not healing, it's punishment. It's the illusion of peace used to manipulate. You'll be tempted to break the silence, to ask why, to fix what they've broken. But that's exactly what they want. They want your need for resolution to become their leverage. Don't give them that power. Because true peace doesn't demand your suffering. It doesn't withhold affection like a hostage. If someone's silence feels more like a sentence than serenity, it isn't healing, it's harm. And the only response that preserves your dignity is stillness. Not silence used to punish, but silence used to protect. You are not being ignored, you are being manipulated. And once you see it, you no longer have to play along. This is where the silence becomes weaponized, where it's no longer just absence, it's erasure. Stonewalling is the narcissist's ultimate form of emotional withholding. They shut you out completely. No explanations, no answers, no eye contact, no goodbye. Just a wall, cold and unmovable, where once there was connection. You try to reach out, to clarify, to reconnect, and you get nothing. Not even anger, just indifference. And that, more than cruelty, is what cuts the deepest. Because at least anger is human, indifference is void. Carl Jung warned that whatever is rejected from the self appears in the world as an event. And in the narcissist's case, what they reject, vulnerability, intimacy, self-reflection, becomes projected onto you. Their emotional silence becomes your internal chaos. Their refusal to communicate becomes your anxiety. You're left wondering if you've become invisible, or if you were ever truly seen at all. That's the cruelty of stonewalling. It mimics disappearance, but it's fully conscious. It's a silent scream designed to destabilize you. They don't want resolution. They want dominance. And by refusing to engage, they remain in control. You'll find yourself going over every word, every moment, looking for a misstep. You'll ask yourself if you were too much or not enough. That's how the narcissist wins, by making their silence your burden. They withhold affection like oxygen until you forget how to breathe on your own. And still, this isn't emotional restraint, it's emotional starvation. True emotional maturity means holding space, even in conflict. But narcissists don't hold space, they occupy it like tyrants. Their silence isn't peace, it's proof they cannot sit with discomfort, cannot regulate emotion, cannot offer intimacy unless it serves their image. Stonewalling is how they pretend to be composed while causing psychological injury, and you, if you're not careful, begin to internalize that damage as your own flaw. But the truth is simpler. Silence isn't always strength. Sometimes it's suppression in disguise. And those who suppress, rather than integrate, eventually become what they most fear: empty, bitter, and emotionally exiled. Don't let their stonewalling distort your self-worth. Your emotions are not too much. Your questions are not shameful. Their silence says nothing about your value and everything about their inability to face themselves. While the narcissist offers you silence, know this: they are not silent everywhere. With you, they vanish. But in the shadows, their voice grows louder, more theatrical. The moment they feel their control slipping, they begin building a new stage zone where they are the misunderstood victim and you, the villain. It starts subtly. A quiet conversation here. A well-placed sigh there. I just don't know what happened. They changed. The story spreads, softly at first, like smoke through a locked room. And before you even realize what's happening, people who once smiled at you now look away, unsure of what to believe. This is the narcissist smear campaign, a form of social sabotage that doesn't scream, it whispers. Carefully constructed lies designed to discredit you, delivered with just enough emotion to seem real. They won't accuse you outright. They'll imply, suggest, plant seeds of doubt in the minds of those around you. I tried everything. They became so unstable. I just want peace. And because you're still reeling from the silence, from the shock of abandonment, you're not there to defend yourself. And that's exactly what they count on. Carl Jung once warned, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. And the narcissist's charm in public is often the perfect camouflage for their darkness in private. They manipulate perception like a master illusionist, turning empathy into leverage. They will cry in front of others, then stonewall you in private. They will claim they're heartbroken while carefully orchestrating your emotional exile. The smear campaign isn't just about revenge. It's about control. If they can't own you, they will try to own your narrative. And they'll do it in ways that make you look bitter if you defend yourself, crazy if you try to explain, and guilty if you stay silent. It's a trap either way. But here's the truth. The people who believe their lies were never truly yours, and those who know your heart will feel the dissonance in their words. Let the narcissist talk. Let them spin their web. The louder they speak behind your back, the more power you reclaim in your quiet refusal to play. Because while they perform for the world, you're learning to rise without their permission, without their version of the truth. Even after the narcissist has left the room, something stays behind. An ache, a question, a tightness in your chest you can't quite name. You think they're gone, but their energy remains. That's the final layer of sabotage. Not what they say, not what they do, but what they leave buried inside you. The guilt, the doubt, the obsessive need to figure out what went wrong. And that lingering presence? That's no accident. It's a residue of psychic entanglement, an invisible thread forged not in love, but in manipulation. Carl Jung spoke of Ithau, the unconscious, when not made conscious, will rule our lives as fate. And this is how the narcissist lives on in your thoughts, not through memory, but through emotional intrusion. Their energy slips into your silence, into your stillness, into your healing moments. They haunt your peace not because you want them to, but because they installed a program that's still running. You're to blame. You failed. You lost something valuable. And it loops over and over until you confuse that voice with your own. This is not spiritual. It's psychological. Energetic sabotage is what happens when you've absorbed someone else's shadow and begin to carry it as your identity. Their fear becomes your anxiety. Their emptiness becomes your shame. Their silence becomes your self-doubt. And all of it is designed to keep you tied to them even in their absence. They don't need to speak to control you. They've already trained your nervous system to flinch at the thought of their disappointment. That's the real war. Not over attention, but over your mind. Breaking this bond requires more than time. It requires consciousness. You must begin to separate what is yours from what was projected onto you. When guilt rises, ask, whose voice is this? When shame whispers, ask, whose burden am I carrying? Because once you identify the energy that doesn't belong to you, you can begin to return it, to send it back to where it came from, without needing revenge, without needing closure. The narcissist doesn't need to be in your life to still be affecting it. But here's the truth. They only haunt what you haven't healed. The more you reconnect with your own center, the quieter their echo becomes, and eventually it stops. Not because they changed, but because you no longer resonate with the frequency of their chaos. That is when you are truly free. Just when the silence begins to feel like distance, when your breath starts to return, your mind begins to clear, and the space they left behind no longer acts there. It is a message, a call, a coincidence that isn't a coincidence at all. I was just thinking about you. I miss us. I've changed. And suddenly, the same person who vanished without a trace reappears, full of tenderness, urgency, or sometimes chaos. This is the narcissist's last-ditch effort to suck you back into their world. It's not love, it's strategy. A desperate grasp for control once they realize their silence didn't break you. You didn't beg. You didn't chase. And that terrifies them. At first, it might feel like relief, a sign that they finally understand that maybe now things could be different. But listen closely not to their words, but to your body. That tightening in your chest, that twinge of confusion, that instinct that whispers, something isn't right. That's your truth, trying to surface through the noise. Because the Hoover doesn't come from healing, it comes from panic. The narcissist sees you slipping out of reach not emotionally, but energetically. Your peace unsettles them. Your silence shames them. Your recovery exposes what they can't face within themselves. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And this return, this sudden affection or drama, it's not about you. It's about avoiding their own emptiness. They reach for you not because they love you, but because without your attention, they are forced to sit in a silence they can't manipulate. So they bait you with memories, with apologies, with manufactured crises. And if you respond, even with anger, they win. The game resets, the control returns. But if you hold the leaf, you feel the pull and still choose your peace, you break the cycle. And that, more than anything, is what they fear. Not your silence, but your evolution. Because when you no longer respond, when you no longer need to be heard by someone committed to misunderstanding you, you reclaim something sacred, your power. As the silence stretches and the Hoover fails, the narcissist reaches for another familiar tacticone more insidious than blame, more corrosive than lies, projection. This is when the roles suddenly reverse. You become the cold one, the heartless one, the abuser, and they are the wounded soul, the misunderstood victim, the one who tried everything. It's not logis, it's theater. A play where they hand you their guilt, their shame, their unhealed wounds, and expect you to carry them as your own. This isn't conflict resolution. It's spiritual sleight of hand. Narcissists can't bear the discomfort of their own shadow, so they do what they've always done, they cast it onto the nearest empath. Suddenly, you're being accused of the very things they did. You were too much. You abandoned them. You were emotionally manipulative. It's so disorienting because on some level, you begin to wonder if they're right. That's the trap. Their projection is designed to confuse your compasso. You spin in circles trying to justify a truth that was never yours to begin with. Carl Jung explained it best. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The narcissist refuses that responsibility. So they hand their unconscious darkness to you and call it yours. And if you're not grounded, if you're still seeking their approval, their narrative will become your identity. You'll apologize for things you never did. You'll shrink to soothe wounds that were never yours to heal. But here's the truth. Their accusations are reflections of their own internal war. Their guilt disguised as your crime. Their shame dressed in your clothing. This is not accountability. This is avoidance. They don't want resolution. They want a scapegoat. And the more you try to explain yourself, the more deeply you sink into their illusion. Don't play the role they've cast for you. Step out of their projection and return to your truth. You are not the villain in their drama. You are simply the one who chose to stop playing. And that's why they need to rewrite the story, because your boundaries challenge the lie they tell themselves. When someone projects, don't argue. Don't beg to be seen. Just remember, what they say about you often says more about what they refuse to face in themselves. It's just silence, right? No words, no calls, no contact. And yet it feels like a scream. A scream that echoes in your chest, not because of what's been said, but because of what's been withheld. You walk through your day with 1,000 questions stuck in your throat, and not a single one finds an answer. That's the cruelty of the narcissist's silence. It doesn't end a conversation, it erases it. And in that erasure, you begin to erase parts of yourself. This kind of silence reopens old wounds, the kind buried so deep you thought time had forgotten them. The abandonment wound, the fear of being unworthy, the confusion that comes from being emotionally punished without explanation. You're left standing in the middle of a void that feels eerily familiar, and that familiarity, that's the part that breaks you. Because the narcissist didn't create that wound. They found it, exploited it, reawakened it with surgical precision. Their silence isn't just silence, it's a mirror. And what it reflects is the part of you still waiting to be chosen, to be heard, to be enough. Carl Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This is how it happens. The narcissist's withdrawal feels so devastating not just because of what they do, but because of what you haven't yet healed. Their silence fits perfectly into the shape of your oldest pain. And suddenly, you're not just grieving them, you're grieving every time someone left without telling you why. You begin to doubt yourself, replay everything. Were you too much? Too sensitive? Not enough? But here's the truth. The silence hurts because it was designed to. Not by accident, but by intention. It's not a sign that you're broken. It's a sign that you've been targeted where you're still tender. And that pain isn't your punishment, it's your portal. A signal pointing directly to the place in you that needs attention, compassion, and truth. The silence was meant to crush you. But if you let it, it can also awaken you. Not to their love, but to your own. There comes a moment not loud, not dramatic, when the veil begins to lift. When you no longer see their silence as mystery, but as manipulation. When you no longer feel the urge to decode their absence, but to decode your own response to it. That's the shift. That's when the spell begins to break, because for so long you thought this was about love. About miscommunication. About fixing something that was once beautiful. But now you see it. This wasn't love. It was a pattern. A loop designed to keep you chasing something that was never real. Stepping back isn't easy. It means confronting how deeply you wanted to believe in the fantasy. It means admitting that their charm, their warmth, their attention was often just bait. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. You begin to spot the cycle, idealize, devalue, discard, repeat. And with each repetition, a little more of your self-worth eroded. Until you mistook survival for connection and silence for depth. Carl Jung taught that, quote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are," quote, "and becoming who you are means pulling yourself out of roles you were never meant to play. You are not the fixer, not the mind reader, not the emotional punching bag. You are the one who wakes up, the one who learns to sit with discomfort without trying to fix someone else's dysfunction. The one who sees the game and chooses to stop playing." So how do you stay grounded? First, name the pattern. Speak it aloud. Clarity is power. Then, return to your body. Breathe. Write. Walk. Let your nervous system remember that safety doesn't come from their approval, it comes from your presence. Create space between stimulus and response. When they pull away, you don't chase. When they hoover, you don't react. When they accuse, you don't explain. You observe. You detach. You stay with yourself. Emotional sovereignty is built moment by moment. It's not a declaration, it's a practice. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be awake. Because the narcissist's power doesn't lie in who they are, lies in who you forget you are when you're with them. And once you remember, they can't reach you anymore. Not really. The spell is broken. And in that space where chaos once lived, something else begins to grow: peace. The kind you don't have to earn, the kind you never have to beg for again. There is a silence that punishes, and there is a silence that heals. One is a weapon, the other is a refuge, and the difference between the two lies not in what is said but in what is felt. The narcissist uses silence to inflict suffering. They withdraw not to reflect, but to wound. They disappear not for peace, but for power. Their silence is a message carved in absence. I control when you're seen, when you're heard, when you're loved. But your silence? Your silence is not the same. Your silence is stillness, a conscious choice to protect your energy, your boundaries, your clarity. It's not about revenge, it's about recovery. It's not the cold shoulder, it's the warm return to self. The narcissist's silence demands your suffering. Yours offers your soul a place to breathe, and yet you may feel guilt for not responding, for pulling away, for refusing to explain yourself one more time. But here's the truth. Peace does not require an apology. Stillness does not need justification. Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." In your stillness, you begin to awaken to the truth, to your worth, to the realization that your value was never tied to their approval. You start to see that every time you chose suffering over stillness, it was because you believed you had to earn love through pain. But not anymore. Now you choose differently. When they go silent to control you, choose your silence to free yourself. When they ghost, you ground. When they vanish, you reconnect not with them, but with a part of you that no longer needs to be chosen to feel whole. This is your stillness, and it's not passive, it's power. Because you no longer dance to their rhythm, you create your own. You no longer beg to be understood, you begin to understand yourself. And in that sacred pause, you realize something they never could. Peace isn't the absence of noise, it's the presence of truth. There are two ways to deal with pain: integrate it or project it. One path leads to healing, the other to harm. And this is where the narcissist reveals their true nature, not in moments of connection, but in moments of conflict. Emotional maturity isn't about avoiding wounds. It's about walking through them, feeling them, owning them. But narcissists don't walk into their wounds, they walk around them, then hand them to you. That's not resolution, that's projection. It's not healing, it's harm disguised as self-defense. Where you feel and process, they deflect and accuse. Where you reflect, they blame. And while you're trying to grow, they're trying to manipulate the soil beneath your feet so you never get the chance. Because integration requires self-awareness. And self-awareness demands humility. But the narcissist can't admit fault, not because they don't see it, but because admitting it would shatter the fragile identity they've spent their life protecting. So instead, they break you. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating every part of the self, light and shadow, past and present, pain and wisdom. But narcissists live in fragmentation. They hide their shame in charm, their fear in control, their self-loathing in superiority. They cannot become whole because they refuse to meet the parts of themselves that hurt. And so, they cling to manipulation, to external validation, to people they can use as mirrors to reflect only what they want to see. You, on the other hand, are learning to sit with your discomfort, to ask, what is this pain trying to teach me? That is integration. That is emotional sovereignty. While they run from the truth, you walk straight into it. And though it burns, you know it's real. Because what's integrated doesn't control you. It frees you. You're not just surviving the wound, you're becoming someone new because of it. So when they accuse, project, and spin their version of reality, don't follow them. Stand still. Stay grounded in what you know. They manipulate because they cannot transform. But you're not afraid of your shadow. You've met it, named it, made peace with it. And that is something no narcissist can fake: wholeness. The very thing you're becoming, one honest step at a time. There is a moment quiet, unshakable, when you stop trying to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer explain, you no longer defend. You no longer participate in a game rigged to make you lose yourself. And in that moment, your silence becomes something greater than avoidance. It becomes a declaration, a line drawn not in anger but in self-respect. Because when you choose not to react, not to plead, not to chase, you are no longer trying to win them over. You are reclaiming yourself. To the narcissist, this is unbearable, because your silence reflects something they've spent their entire life escaping, their own emptiness. When you do not respond, when you refuse to absorb their projections, when you stand in stillness rather than collapse into chaos, you become the mirror they cannot shatter. They will call you cold, detached, uncaring. But that's not truth, it's discomfort. It's what happens when someone used to control no longer holds the strings. They confuse your peace with punishment because it no longer bends to their need for dominance. Carl Jung once said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." That is the essence of self-mastery, to become not in reaction to pain, but in alignment with your truth. The narcissist needs a reaction to exist. Their identity is built on the feedback loop of control and chaos. But when you step out of that loop, when you choose not to engage, you collapse their illusion. You show them that your identity is no longer a response to their behavior. You are no longer shaped by their silence. You are shaped by your own awakening. Your silence isn't void, it is presence. It is every boundary they ignored, now enforced without apology. It is every truth they tried to twist, now reclaimed without a word. It is your decision to no longer be defined by dysfunction but by your own inner peace. And that kind of silence? That's not retreat, it's revolution. So let them speak, let them spin. You owe them nothing. You owe yourself everything. Because real power doesn't need an audience. It doesn't demand revenge. It simply walks away whole, unmoved, and free. This story was intense. But this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.